Sugar is my golden retriever. Actually, my son would say it's his, but I take care of it. There's her. And Sugar has actually a point today. She's going to show up in the lecture. But she is a free agent. She's going wherever she wants. You can pet her. You guys missing your dogs? Here's your chance. The music today was Cat Stevens, On the Road to Find Out. The title of the lecture today is Living the Journey. What we're going to talk about today is this concept of living the questions first. These lines from the poet Rainer Maria Rilke. Then we're going to turn to a summary of the plot of the Siddhartha book, this third section of the 4 sections of the book. And we're going to spend some time talking about the third noble truth, the snares of the world, and then talk about the spiritual journey. I want to say something about human beings as meaning-seeking animals. That's Sugar's moment. Question of problems of meaning. Come back to Siddhartha. Again, this issue of living the questions. And then finally, Steve Jobs is going to give us a little talk they gave at Stanford commencement. So I want to begin by you're listening to Rainer Maria Rilke's words in his letter to a young poet.
You are so young, so much before all beginning, and I would like to beg you, dear sir, as well as I can, to have patience with everything unresolved in your heart, and to try to love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. Don't search for the answers, which could not be given to you now, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps then, someday far in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer.
Yesterday, I happened to be in Peabody Hall, Dean of Students' office, and I ran across a student who had taken this class last semester. I asked him, tell me, what do you remember? First thing the guy said was, I remember Sugar. Remember when I brought Sugar to class. And the second thing he said he remembered was this idea of living the questions, this concept from the German poet Rainer Maria Rilke. Rilke is an older man, is a poet, and a young man comes to him and asks him about poetry, really asks him questions about life. And Rilke's response to him, as it's stated in this poem, is that, you know, I really cannot give you the answers to the questions that you have. And even if I could give you the answers, you could not live them. What you need to do is you need to take those questions, big questions. What is the purpose of my life? What is supposed to happen? You know, all the stuff we've been talking about, career, marriage, whatever it is. And you cannot answer those questions just by thinking. What you're going to have to do is live the questions. In other words, they will be answered in the course of your living. So Rilke says, the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. So no smart ratiocination, no thinking is going to get you to the answer to these questions. It's going to come through living. So we're going to keep coming back to this idea of living the questions, but now I want to place it into the context of the book. So what's going on in the book? As you recall, at the end of a period of time with the Samanas, and then with the Buddha himself, Siddhartha concludes that Buddhism will not give him the answers he needs. He is living his questions. Sadly, he leaves Govinda and begins a search for the meaning of life, the achievement of which he fears will not be dependent on religious instruction. Siddhartha decides to embark on a life free from meditation and the spiritual quests he has been pursuing, and to instead learn from the pleasures of the body and the material world. Maybe the answers are there. In his new wanderings, a beautiful courtesan named Kamala entrances him. He knows she would be the best one to teach him about the world of love. But Kamala will not have him unless he proves he can fit into the material world. She convinces him to take up the path of the merchant. While Siddhartha learns the wisdom of the business world and begins to master the skills Kamaswami teaches him, Kamala becomes his lover and teaches him what she knows about love. Years pass, and Siddhartha's business acumen increases. Soon he is a rich man and enjoys the benefits of an affluent life. He gambles, drinks, dances, and anything that can be bought in the material world is his for the taking. Siddhartha is detached from this life, however, and he can never see it as more than a game. He doesn't care if he wins or loses this game because it doesn't touch his spirit in any lasting way. The more he obtains in the material world, the less it satisfies him. And he's soon caught up in a cycle of unhappiness that he tries to escape by engaging in even more gambling, drinking, and sex. When he's at his most disillusioned, he dreams that Kamala's rare songbird is dead in its cage. He understands that the material world is slowly killing him without providing him with the enlightenment for which he has been searching. One night, he resolves to leave it all behind and departs without noticing either Kamala or Kamaswami. This section that we read for today's class seems to underscore the attractions of the world, of money and love and lots of it. I often advise students, again, their parents would kill me, say, if the answer is sex, drugs, money, do it. Do it. Go. Get it. Have it. Party all night. Drink all day. Go for it. Go, if that's happiness, go for it, okay? And come back and talk to me after you've done it for a while and let me know how it's going, all right? There are things that we have high on our bucket list that we want to accomplish in this world. We want certain things to occur, and then we're going to be happy. I was sitting in on Kadesh's class, and there was a conversation. No, it wasn't. Yes, it was Shem's class. There was a conversation about happiness. What is happiness? And the teachings from the Buddha and the teachings from Siddhartha are that happiness is nothing out there that you can pursue. That's an attachment. Happiness is something that occurs in the present moment and is only available in the present moment. And this is a concept that it's hard for us to understand. If you get nothing else from Buddhism, okay, one concept of Buddhism that you can take home that's very useful is that you can count on change. You want something permanent and solid in this life? Change. It will change. I mean, it's an enormous comfort. However it's supposed to happen, it will not happen that way. It will change. I have this terrible situation right now. What should I do? Just wait. It will change. Okay? Impermanence is the concept in Buddhism that I think is the most enduring one. What does that mean? That means don't rely upon some fantasy, some possibility of the future. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't pursue your dreams, but you sit lightly with them, because it is a snare to be, in the Buddhist sense, attached to it. Okay? So all we have, and this seems very hackneyed, but it's true from Buddhism's perspective, is the present moment. There's nothing else. All we have is the present moment. Sugar, wherever she is right now, she lives in the present moment. She doesn't plan very far into the future, okay? Watch animals. They're kind of right there in the moment. You can learn from them. So the third noble truth of Buddhism, therefore, the third one, this is what he says. In the Buddha's description of the third noble truth, he says, our desires are identified as the source of suffering. Life is suffering, first noble truth. The source of suffering is attachment, our desires, our wanting things to happen. The end of suffering, third noble truth, is possible by letting go of our attachments, by letting go of our images of what happiness is, okay? That doesn't mean you just totally let it go, you sit lightly with it. There are many possibilities that can occur here, and attached to one, and it has to happen or I die, will cause suffering. Our attachments, therefore, are our desires. I said in a previous lecture, why can't you die right now? Why can't I die right now? It's because of my attachments. No, it can't happen because this has to happen, that has to, no. Free of those attachments, you're free to die. You can live in this moment, okay? Suffering cannot be overcome, and this is a critical point, with human activity, rather by removing the cause of suffering. The cause of suffering is the attachment, all right? I want to become a doctor, and that's okay, and hold on to that. But if it doesn't turn out that way, it's a cause of suffering if you continue to insist upon it. You let go of it, maybe you're supposed to go another way. In doing this and letting go of attachments, one experiences a newfound freedom from worries, troubles, complexes, fabrications, and ideas. Now here there's a distinction between what we might call the desire for God, the quest for meaning, or the spiritual journey, to try three metaphors, and the distractions of the material and sensual world. For most of this section, Siddhartha is trying to find the meaning he seeks apart from the world of the spirit. He's basically saying, sex and drugs and rock and roll, let's go for it, all right? But throughout it all, like way back at the beginning of the story, he's secretly dissatisfied. It's not delivering what he had hoped for. So here we're in a section dominated by the investigation of the veracity of the third noble truth, which states that the source of suffering is our cravings. What seems to sustain Siddhartha through this period of what the Hindus call householdership, having a family, having a job, is his abiding desire throughout it all to live the questions. Underneath it all, he is living the questions of what's the meaning, what's the purpose. And he is living his way into the answer. Seeking answers in wealth and a loving partner, Siddhartha spends many years raising a family and developing business acumen and wealth. This doesn't work. And that will be the concern of the last part of the book. But what I want to talk about today is this ongoing quest for meaning that Siddhartha pursues all through his life. The reason I brought Sugar into class today, because she's fun, is so I could demonstrate a point. But before I can get there, I want to spend a little time explaining cultural anthropology's take on what religious meaning provides to human beings. I think we need to understand this in order that we can comprehend the last portion of the book. The anthropologist Clifford Geertz believes that human beings are animals suspended in webs of significance they themselves have spun. He takes culture to be those webs, and the analysis of culture is therefore not an experimental science in search of law, but an interpretive one in search of meaning. What does that mean? Human beings are meaning-seeking animals who spin for ourselves webs of meaning. We are animals who must spin for ourselves webs of meaning. The difference between us and sugar is that she is an animal and we are human beings. Though we may project it upon her, sugar does not experience existential angst. Sugar does not say, what is the purpose? Who am I? What's my major? Who shall I marry? Sugar is not possessed by these questions. You guys have had an animal, a dog or a cat, and you've watched them give birth. You know, watch a dog give birth to puppies or a kid. They're not reading the book, What to Expect when you're expecting, what should we do now? Sugar knows. Sugar knows. I mean, Lord, if we could just be like animals, then we wouldn't have any of these questions. Sugar's got it down. It's in her genetic programming to be who she is. Sugar's a dog. It's easy. It's easy. When Sugar steals something off the table, my son always says, hey, Sugar's a dog. You know, Sugar's a dog. That's who she is, okay? You guys are not animals. In other words, this is my point in the midst of all this fun here. My point is that you guys have weak genetic programming with regard to the question of the meaning of life and the purpose, okay? Human beings are meaning-seeking animals who spin for themselves webs of significance. You create your meaning, and you have to do it. You are responsible as a human being. But Sugar's not worried about this. This is just not her issue, okay? Sugar's living in the moment, and she's got this genetic programming that tells her what she needs to do. Clifford Geertz believes that human beings are confronted with certain chaotic forces that give them a sense of ignorance, pain, or injustice, which have to be understood in terms of religious symbolism. Religion comes in when you have no adequate answer. Some friend of yours gets hit by a truck. How could that have happened? All right? Somebody dies inexplicably. How can we explain this? You have to come up with webs of significance. You have to come up with explanation. People are also confronted with pain at the limits of their ability to endure pain. Why did the Holocaust kill 6 million Jews? Why, the mother asked, did that truck kill my child? What's the purpose of this? What's the reason for suffering? Human beings have to come up with answers to these questions. Or there's this terrible, awful, wonderful expression, which is, or are you just going to take it like a dog? You ever heard that line? Take it like a dog. You just suffer. You just suffer, you know? Something bad happens to Sugar, she just sits there and she's just in pain. She just suffers. She doesn't say, why did this happen to me? You know? She doesn't worry about those things. She just suffers. Answers to these deep and abiding questions, ways of dealing with profound dilemmas of human life, Clifford Geertz tells us, are offered by religious symbolism. So let me go back to Siddhartha. At the end of today's section, you recall, Siddhartha is coming to realize that the more he obtains in the material world, the less it satisfies him. And he's soon caught in a cycle of unhappiness that he tries to escape by engaging in even more gambling, drinking, and sex. He understands that the material world is slowly killing him without providing him with the meaning for which he has been searching. To place this in the context of Geertz, cultural anthropology, what Siddhartha is experiencing is a dissatisfaction with the answers the world has given to him to questions of meaning. And so he must seek it back in the religious world he had left. So this returns us to the idea of living the questions. I just want you to hear this again.
You are so young, so much before all beginning, and I would like to beg you, dear sir, as well as I can, to have patience with everything unresolved in your heart, and to try to love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. Don't search for the answers, which could not be given to you now, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps then, some day far in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer.
So the issue today is living the questions. The Cat Stevens song was on the road to find out. And when you were almost exactly, when Steve Jobs was exactly the age that you were, and he was in college, he was confronting these questions. Steve Jobs, you know who he is, founded Apple, okay? And we're going to listen now to Steve Jobs talking about what he did with his college experience.
This was the closest I've been to facing death, and I hope it's the closest I get for a few more decades. Having lived through it, I can now say this to you with a bit more certainty than when death was a useful but purely intellectual concept. No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet, death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it. And that is as it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention of life. It's life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. Right now, the new is you. But someday, not too long from now, you will gradually become the old and be cleared away. Sorry to be so dramatic, but it's quite true. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary.
That's the end of Steve Jobs' commencement address at Stanford University. In the beginning of the address, it's only about 10 minutes. And I'd hoped to play for the beginning of that to you now, but it didn't come up. Jobs tells the story of his going away to Reed College when he was 18. He came from a poor home, and his parents really didn't have the money to put him to college, but they scraped the money together. And he went through the first semester at Reed College, and he found that though it was a nice place, and there were interesting people there, what they were teaching him wasn't really what he was interested in. But his parents had paid for the year, and so he decided to stay on. And he said that rather than pursue a career or anything, I'm just going to take the classes that I want. He took a class in writing, in particular kinds of graphic writing. And many years later, it's what he learned in that graphic writing class that became the script that was used in the first Apple computers. And after about a year, he decides he leaves Reed College and he goes home. And you probably know the story after that. He gets involved in his garage with a friend and starts fooling around. But what he says here is that college was not what he wanted. What he wanted was to find something that he loved. And he pursued that, and he dropped out. And his advice to the Stanford graduating class is to follow your heart, loving only what you can do. You've got to find out what you love. The other thing Jobs says in this talk is he says, only do great work. Don't settle. Keep looking. I guess I'll sort of do this sort of thing because it's going to sort of provide me with a certain amount of income, and that's okay. Now, don't settle. Don't compromise. Jobs was absolutely ruthless. He said, I'm just not happy here. I'm going to pursue what I'm going to pursue. He also says in this talk, you're supposed to live each day as if it were your last. Change the situation if you don't like the situation. Don't do something you don't want to do. Okay? You have nothing to lose. There is no reason not to follow your path. And he's quite strong about this, and he says this in several ways. He tells different stories about his biography, and you can look it up on YouTube. It's a 10-minute talk, okay? And at the end of the talk, he says what you just heard, that death is the best invention of life, life's changing agent. Your time is limited, so don't waste it by living somebody else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma. What's dogma? Which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drive out your own inner voice. Jobs says, have the courage to follow the courage of your heart and intuition. They somehow know where to take you. So y'all know what happened to Steve Jobs, okay? But he did it completely on his own and completely out of dissatisfaction with the answers that were being provided him in life. And he went out of his way just to find it on his own. He went through a lot of failures, but eventually succeeded in the ways that you know he has succeeded. What is Jobs saying here? Jobs saying that the deal is to live your questions and don't settle. Don't compromise. Don't compromise. This last week, I had a heart-to-heart conversation with a student who was in her third year and just not making sense anymore. And she doesn't know what to do. And I said, again, your parents would kill me, okay? I said, so why don't you leave? Why don't you just leave? Why don't you go and try to find out some other way of doing this, okay? Maybe you'll come back, maybe you won't. But obviously the answers that you're seeking are not being provided in this environment or the classes that you're taking. Jobs did that. It took an enormous amount of courage. And a lot of us, myself included, think, oh no, that's too much. I can't do that. I can't do that. Jobs says, don't settle. Don't settle. Don't settle. Go on and pursue your dream. Yeah, but what do my parents say and I can't drop out of school? Yeah, you can. Again, they'll kill me. But you can't. But you can do this. You can do this. Don't settle. Live the questions now. Live those deep with a certain ruthlessness, you know? And again, you go back to this thing about sex and drugs and rock and roll. I mean that seriously. If you really think that's the answer, do it. Big time. You know, big time. Go for it. Let me know how it goes. Then we'll talk again, all right? But Steve Jobs' path was one of an enormous amount of courage. And he just wouldn't settle. Just wouldn't settle. And he kept going. So in Siddhartha's sense, he has tried really hard to make money. He has tried really hard to be a good husband, okay? But he seems now to be dissatisfied. Underneath it all, he continues to be dissatisfied. And he has the courage to leave it and to go on beyond that and to seek answers outside of the answers that have been given him by the material world. So what happens next? That's the end of the book. And that's what we're going to talk about next time. And next time we're going to talk about this whole concept of enlightenment. And my intention in talking about enlightenment is to begin to shake it out of the clouds and to talk about it as something within the human experience. And Sugar's completely fallen asleep. Okay, that's it for today, guys. See you next time.